Welcome everyone, and thanks for the invitation, Professor Bersnak. We had a number of occasions to meet at different places of the world, but mostly in Hungary. And so now it's a great pleasure to visit you here and to learn of the work that you do here. It's a center that I've heard about within Catholic higher education, something that becomes more and more important and influential as well. So it's a great occasion for me to present my ideas, myself being Catholic and the one who taught at the Catholic University of Hungary for 24 years. So I'm old enough. As Bracey mentioned, right now I have got a position as a research professor at the University of Public Service in Hungary, which means that I sit down just to encourage you to pursue a job like that, a career like that. I get up at 5:15 in the morning and sit down and work, and I go to bed at 11 just to be able to get up next morning. So that's the sort of appeal that I can provide of a career in philosophy as a research scholar. Today I would like to talk about a theme which is quite close to my heart. I would like to introduce a political philosopher and philosopher of art by the name of Roger Scruton. Sir Roger Scruton, if you want. And I think it's nice to have that tradition, so why not call him like that? And the title that I gave to this talk sounds the following way: From Politics to Central Europe to Art and to Religion. From Politics to Central Europe to Art and to Religion. Roger Scruton's exceptional Voyage. And in fact, I had a very nice painting had the television work properly, but I will send the slides and then your professors can share with you. It's actually something quite fitting to this place because it's a painting about Jesus. Jesus on a hill, on the top of a hill, talking to his followers. And of course, that's the Sermon on the Mount that is described like that. But the scenery is quite close to what you have got here. And I think that it tells us a lot because this is a group of people surrounding someone, and politics is about human communities. It's painted by a Hungarian painter, so it has got something to do with Central Europe. It's an artwork, so it has got something to do with art. And it's about a biblical story, so it's about religion. These are the four topics that I would like to talk about because these are crucial phases of Roger Scruton's developments. So first about politics. I will talk about Scruton, the conservative political thinker, in theory and in action. Because as we'll see, Scruton was interested in politics both in theory but also in practice. So he published at least 4 volumes in political philosophy concerning conservatism, which if you take into account that this is just one of the themes that he worked on, then you see how prolific a writer he was. And he did not have the research professorship that I have. So he had to earn the money beside that. He published more than 50 books. Some people argue that even more than 70. It depends how you count what a book is. But 50 plus books, if you had to read all that, it would take some time. And then imagine if you wanted to copy it for yourself, then it would make even more. And then you had to write each of them. It's hard work. So 4 books on conservatism, starting in 1980 with the meaning of conservatism, which addressed the new government in that country, as if you were now writing a book about conservatism after the election last night. It was just after a year that Margaret Thatcher took over the government in Britain, and he gave a very critical account of her ideas of politics and provided an alternative vision of conservatism. Then in 2006, I guess, he wrote another book with the title A Political Philosophy, Arguments for Conservatism. Then again, a few years later, he wrote How to Be a Conservative. And in his final years, he wrote Conservatism, an Introduction to the Great Tradition. So you see, all his life is spent with an engagement with conservatism. And to be sure, neither of the books are really good. That's the interesting thing. You spend your life researching on an issue, you know it better than anyone else, and you will never write the opus magnum, the great work on it. But that's again a challenge that we philosophers need to address. But what is the sort of conservative vision that he offers? He writes in a chapter of his autobiography, Gentle Regrets, that he became conservative in 1968. And having being born in 44, you can see that he was quite a young guy, like as if one of you now turned into conservative. And the reason behind that was, like as it happens nowadays, campus revolutions in France and all around Europe and the US. So he was witnessing the events in Paris, the events at the Sorbonne and in the streets of Paris. And he found that awful, and he wanted something else. So that's why he, in a provocative manner, read the memoirs of Charles de Gaulle in the same days that these people were destroying the Sorbonne in Paris. So that's the starting point. This is a Cambridge-educated philosopher who went to Paris as a visitor with his first wife, actually, who was French and Catholic. And that's what he finds in Paris. And that's why he turns into a conservative. And then he starts to read around. So what have we got beside de Gaulle's memoirs? Perhaps something more philosophically sound. And he arrives, of course, to Edmund Burke. So the second author that he mentions in this context is Edmund Burke. And his reactions to another French Revolution, the French Revolution of 1789. So there is a continuity in our times, and very interestingly, the Hungarian edition of the Reflections on the Revolution in France that Edmund Burke wrote in 1790, so just after 1 year after the revolution, was published in 1990, and I was the editor, the linguistic editor of that book in 1990, and I was 26 in those years. But the funny thing about it is that that was the year of the transition in Europe, when the communist regime fell, the Iron Curtain fell, and we were liberated. And that was the first occasion when Burke's work could be published, and it was published immediately. So that's the sort of thing that he found around. British conservatism a la Burke against French Enlightenment ideals. But there is a further fact that we have to keep in mind, that he was interested in legal studies. And in Britain, if you are interested in law, you can either go to the university or you go to the Inns Courts, which are special institutions to educate you in the practice of the law. And that's what he decided to get through, and he became actually a very well-educated lawyer, educated in the practice of the law. And that's another source of conservatism for him, because of course in Britain it was the common law that was the basis of this practical education. And the common law is by definition a traditional instrument, a traditional institution, one can say. So this is a conservative thinker educated in the legal tradition of his country, in the common law, and educated in the European tradition of reacting to the extremities of the Enlightenment and revolution. And I mentioned that Scruton was quite critical with Thatcher, and with good reasons, because Thatcher provided a government which was closer to what can be labeled as market liberalism. So a government which tried to have an economy which works properly, but which did not have much deeper intentions concerning social customs and traditions. And Scruton thought that that's not conservatism. That's something else. You can call it liberalism, classical liberalism, whatever, but he wanted something that is really conservative, and therefore he criticized Thatcher. But for this occasion, I brought another of his critical pieces, which is on Donald Trump, because I thought that that might be perhaps more interesting for you in the present moment. And that's a very interesting piece from 2018. So in the very last years of his life, but the very first years, after the very first years of Trump's rule in your country. And he writes a piece for the New York Times, trying to assess the work of President Trump from the perspective of a British conservative. And this is what he finds as problematic. I quote, "In Mr. Trump, we encounter a politician who uses social media to bypass the realm of ideas entirely, addressing the sentiments of his followers without a filter of educated argument and with only a marginal interest in what anyone with a mind might have said." Rather critical, I would say, if you agree with me. Of course, this is the intellectual talking about the practical politician. And we have to keep in mind that these are two different perspectives. And each of them has its own logic, and each of them can criticize the other side with good reasons. He has also good things to say about Trump. For example, and I quote again, "He has understood that the legal order of the United States is rooted in customs that the Constitution was designed to protect." This is a nice kind of agreement, something that they can agree on, i.e. that customs and the ordered way of doing politics is nice. The problem is that, of course, in 2 years' time, January the 6th was to come. So the nice agreement would have gone by that time, because apparently Trump did not really understand that the legal order of the United States is rooted in customs that the Constitution was designed to protect. So this is something that I offer you for discussion, whether you are on one of the sides, which side it would be. He also says that apparently Trump is not really interested in the major things that conservatism wants to preserve, and he defines those areas. This is education, culture, religion, marriage, and the family. These are the fields that are closest to the conservative intellectual, and he claims that Trump is not really interested in them. Why? He gives the following argument. About such, I quote, "About such things it is fair to say that Mr. Trump has at best only a distorted vision. He is a product of the cultural decline that is rapidly consigning our artistic and philosophical inheritance to oblivion." Again, the typical style of a British conservative claiming that Mr. Trump is the product of cultural decline. Okay, I leave politics here. We can return to it if you want in the discussion period. Central Europe. We mentioned his experiences in France in 1968. And now, 1 decade later, we are in the late 70s and the 80s. The Iron Curtain is still there, and Cambridge and Oxford dons have this strange idea that they would like to get over to Central Europe and Eastern Europe in order to give what they called underground classes, underground seminars. In his case, it was Prague that gave place to that experience. And that was something which really defined his whole way of thinking. Because, of course, for a British professor, by that time he was a university professor at Birkbeck College in the University of London, this was an unknown territory. And therefore something that seems to be exotic. You know, you go to a communist country where Soviet soldiers are taking care of the order of the ordinary people's life. That's something exotic, he thought. But what he really found there was, in a way, quite the opposite of it. Because what he found in those persons who were his partners for this endeavor, and who included, for example, Václav Havel, who became later the president of first Czechoslovakia and later Czechia, was a virtuous attitude, a way of life that was admirable, he thought. Why? Because in those circumstances of a totalitarian power, they kept preserving their own tradition and teaching students and introducing them to that. I quote him again from his autobiographical novel. That was an absolute revelation to me, to see this poison around me, i.e. communism, and the difficulty of doing what Havel recommended, which was, and he quotes Havel, living in truth. So in a totalitarian regime, you try to live in truth. That was the challenge of his partners in those countries, including not only Czechia, but also Czechoslovakia in those days, but also Poland, Hungary, and Romania. And he became transformed. Some people say that he became a Central European thinker. I don't think that's true. I know it because I'm a Central European thinker, and he does not resemble me. But we could understand each other very well, I think. So there is indeed a connection between British conservatism and something that Central Europe preserved. And what's that? You have to recall your historical studies where you learned that there was something called a percentage agreement. Is there perhaps anyone who can help me out what the percentage agreement was about? Historians among you? I can help so much that it's something that is connected with the Second World War and an interaction between Churchill and Stalin, perhaps the two greatest leaders of the opposing parties. So the percentage agreement was a small piece of paper which Churchill wrote down for Stalin, in which they shared Europe among themselves. In this country you will have, I can read it out. So Yugoslavia, and he writes Yugo, and in another word Slavia, 50-50%. That's why it's a percentage agreement. So 50% goes to the Soviets, 50 to the Western world. Hungary, 50-50. Bulgaria, 75-25. So in a way, they made a deal. You get that part, I get this part. And that's the percentage agreement, which for Central and Eastern European is, the document of when the West actually sold them out. Yes? And Scruton was aware of the fact that he is now visiting a country which his cherished leader, Churchill, was a conservative leader of the United Kingdom and the Western world, sold out for Russia in order to keep peace in his own country and in the whole world. So there is this moral issue there behind this connection, but there is also a cultural dimension to it. because interestingly, if you have a totalitarian power on your shoulders, like we had, you are encouraged to defend your basic values, the most important, the most relevant basic values, because they are in danger, and therefore you want to defend them. And according to Scruton, the funny thing is that the European tradition is better preserved in those totalitarian states than in the other parts of Europe. Of course, he is exaggerating the case, but the point is made, I think, that in a totalitarian context, for example, religion is more important than in a free world. So look at Poland. The Catholic Church had never have so many believers than in those circumstances. But also in philosophy, you look at the Lublin School, or you look at Jan Patočka in Czechoslovakia, or George Lukács, for that matter, in Hungary, who was a communist thinker. Philosophy is booming in Central Europe. So Central Europe, for Scruton, was a kind of treasure house of European culture, of the European cultural traditions. And in a way, his achievements was so welcomed by those who are living there that by the end of his life, he got decorated by the Czech state, by Poland, and by Hungary as well. So that's Central Europe. Let's see the third phase of his development. We saw him as a conservative thinker. We saw him as a fan of Central Europe. How about art and culture? Now, his PhD was in aesthetics, in general theory or philosophy of art. And he remained in his basic convictions philosopher of art. Why? Because he thought that along the Platonic Thomistic line that beauty has a special place to play in our life. He works out the whole theory in a short book with the title Beauty. But there is a YouTube BBC film about that as well, so you can get it in 30 minutes or 40 minutes. So what's the theory about? Why is beauty important in our life? He claims that human beings are lonely in the world if they don't have a place which they can call home. We all need a home. That's what makes us human. Or that's the consequence of being human. We need a place where we feel at home, and we want that place to look nice, to look like homely. And that's why we look for beauty. We want to make our surroundings, the special place that we live, to look nice, to look like close to our heart. And that's what beauty is about, to make our surroundings, our place look beautiful. And also in human interactions it has a play, because as we want to make our environment a home, we also need friends and family. And friends and family are also defined by aesthetic qualities. Friendship is a form of expression of the beautiful, as Plato describes. and we choose our lifelong partner, our wife or husband as well, along aesthetic terms. That's not because we go for pure enjoyment. On the contrary, the idea is that external beauty, human beauty, we are talking now about human beauty, is an expression of something that is within you, within the human body, the internal beauty and the external beauty are in harmony. That's the idea. And there is a third dimension, so there is home, there are the interpersonal relationships, and there is a third sphere, order, moderation, and proportion in human communities. These are again aesthetic qualities, order, moderation, and proportion. And they have got political consequences. We want to live in societies, in communities, which are ordered, moderated, and proportioned. And these are the qualities that come from aesthetic sensibility. And this is just one aspect of his interest in the art and culture, because he had two specific art forms which he himself practiced. One is architecture, the other one is music. He wrote aesthetics of architecture and aesthetics of music, general theories of these two art forms. And he participated in urban developments, like in Poundbury, which is a small quarter of a city in Britain that was developed along the lines that was provided by Prince Charles in those days and famous Italian architect Leon Krier. But he also participated in his last year in a government commission, the Better Building Beautiful Commission, and the name of the commission is already very telling, I would say. This commission was invited by the Tory government, and the function was to write a report how to regulate urban development, urban investment around the country to preserve beauty. With that simple object, how to make sure that new investments will be beautiful. And he wrote in the last year when he was struggling with cancer, he wrote the final report together with the members of this commission. And this is a kind of the legacy that he summarized, his basic principles of how to live together in human communities along the lines that beauty provides. The other art form that he was interested in was music. And he learned to play the piano, and he became a composer himself. So he learned it seriously. And he also wrote librettos, opera librettos, for the music that he composed. So he tried out himself as an artist as well. As in politics, he was practical as well as theoretical. In art too, you will not understand the nature of art without actually practicing it. So he wanted to practice music, but he also wrote a lot about it. I said that I mentioned that he had this general theory of music, but he had some specific ones, in particular, more than one book about Wagner, Richard Wagner, this German composer. And he understood Wagner as a very special kind of composer. He was quite critical from one point of view of Wagner, the man, the individual person, because of his anti-Semitism, because of his behavior with women, and so on and so on. So the person himself had serious faults, but the artist had a serious message, he claims, and that message has two dimensions. One is connected to community. These are Wagner's operas we are talking about. These are modern, present-day recollections of German, traditional German epics, and using traditional German music. I.e., he wanted, Richard Wagner, to provide an art form, the modern opera, to present the traditions of his own society, the tradition of his own political community. Now, of course, a lot of people attack Wagner that he prepared something like the Nazi German ideology with his operas. And Scruton does not agree with him. He agrees that he was anti-Semitic. On the other hand, what he says is that the Ring, for example, is a very truthful account of the tradition of the German village community and urban community. These are very important things for Scruton himself. But there is a second dimension, beyond the communal dimension, one can say beyond the political sense of Wagner's opera. There is a personal dimension, and that personal dimension concerns love. But love in a metaphysical sense, as well as in a very physical sense. Because the idea is that through Wagner we learn the way how to attribute meaning to our life. Because human life is sometimes quite shocking. Tragedy enters it often. And as soon as that happens, we feel lost. We do not find meaning in it. And according to Scruton, Wagner provides us an answer for the tragedies in our life, for human suffering, in fact. And the idea is that we can make sense even of human suffering, which seems to be quite aimless and purposeless and meaningless, by offering it as a self-sacrifice for those whom we love. And in that way, we can transform suffering because it helps us to realize love towards the other. And that's something which makes our life meaningful. Through self-sacrifice, we are able to overcome our shortcomings, and we are able to offer love to someone else, and that's the most that one can give to the other. So Wagner's opera is there, and most importantly, the Parsifal. That's his last book, which came out after his death, actually. So he wrote it with suffering. And in the Parsifal, what is provided is an example of self-sacrifice for the other. And self-sacrifice offering our love, or Parsifal's love for the other. So that's art and culture, the role of art and culture in human life. And finally, religion and metaphysics. Scruton was an analytical philosopher, and analytical philosophers in Cambridge were educated to avoid to discuss metaphysics. Why? Because that's something that you cannot prove. That's, of course, in the 60s. By now, analytical philosophy has changed a lot, but in those days, there was this Kantian understanding of the role of philosophy, which has a certain limit, and the limit is the dimension of the metaphysical, the beyond. But Scruton, in his last years, in the last decade of his life, decided that he will go for it. Even if I am a Cambridge philosopher, he thought, I went through enough of human experience to address the final questions of what is meaningful in human life. So he has got two books which provides his account of that. The Face of God and The Soul of the World. These are the two books. The Face of God and The Soul of the World. And if I try to explain in a short format what they are about, let me start out again from the landscape. We started with that painting that you couldn't see, but you had to imagine. The Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is sitting around him, the disciples, in that natural environment. Landscape is an important object for Scruton. Why? Because he claims that landscapes have faces. I.e., when we look at a landscape, we look, how we make a sense of it is as if we were looking at a face. The landscape has a certain expression for us because we can see in it something that addresses us. In that way, it's the same as if when we look into a human face, something addresses us. We don't know what exactly because we only see the external, but something addresses us. And he claims that that's actually a crucial experience for human beings, that they can communicate with the others in a way that through encountering the face of the other, they enter something that they don't know what it is. The same way when we walk in the landscape, you can try it out, and you realize at a point that this is something that I like or that I know for some reason. It is like a well-known face. It is like an unknown face that I learn all of a sudden and realize that I have got something to do with that. And if we start out from that, from the face of a landscape, which is actually the face of the earth, Scruton claims, we understand that human reason, human rationality allows us to enter into a realm that is beyond our capacities to understand. Through the human face, we enter the other one, and we don't know what we experience. This is a moment of revelation. Something is revealed through the face of the other. We don't know what, but it's a moment of revelation. The same way, if we walk in the landscape and we see all of a sudden something that addresses us, we encounter something that we do not know exactly what it was, but that addresses us. A moment of revelation again. We find a nice work of art, and again, we experience something that is beyond our rational capacities. And the way that he describes this phenomenon is quite nice and easy to imagine. Imagine a room in which there is a window. There is just one window. And you are in that room, and you go to the window, and you see that through the window you see something that is beyond the room. You don't know exactly what you see, but you see there something. The problem is that the window is closed. So you cannot open it, you cannot get out of it. You will remain in your room, but you see something that is beyond the room. That's how Scruton describes for us the metaphysical dimension. Human experience helps us to arrive to the edge of things, to the edge of human experience, and allows us to have a view of that which is beyond that edge, and we will never be able to get through it in our human life. That's because he did not have a personal experience of God. That's my argument. I.e., he was a believer, but not a believer in an afterlife, and not a believer of a personal God, because he did not have the grace to experience it. But he had those experiences, those moments of revelation, like addressing the other through his or her face, like experiencing a work of art, like experiencing natural beauty, moments of revelation through which he could look at a world which he could never enter. And that's how he imagines that in modernity art takes over the role of religion. He claims that this is a secular age. We don't have that sort of belief that our ancients had, but we have art, and we have personal relationships, and through those we are able to experience something that is beyond our human life. So that's what I had to offer you, i.e. 4 steps in the life of a philosopher, starting out from political experience in 1968 Paris, then having first-hand experience of life in a totalitarian regime in the late 70s and the 80s, and then his own artistic work and his theories of art in architecture and music, and finally his account of metaphysics, an account of a skeptic who tried to gain back at least the view beyond the window that can never be opened. And one final note, we know that in the end of his life, he became acquainted with the community of a small chapel in the surrounding area where he lived, in rural Wiltshire. And he realized that this is a chapel, an Anglican chapel, where they are using the old Bible and the old rites. So he decided that he would join that community, and he went there every Sunday, played the organ for the service, and disappeared after the end of the service. And in a way, it expresses the efforts that he made to try to reach what is there beyond. So thank you very much for your interest.